And the drama may not be verbally or physically. It could be the drama is that you keep getting hurt.
Yes.
But you have to stop and say, okay, for some, it may be a conversation. Some, it may be a book. Some, it may be this podcast that you're like, wow, I need to step back. It's like, man, this is why I'm getting these same repeated results. There's an accounting term that says garbage in, garbage out. And if we don't stop the garbage from coming in, whether it's unspoken expectations, unrealistic expectations.
Hello, and welcome to another amazing episode of TMC, where we are here to help you take your relationships from surviving to thriving. If this is your first time joining us, go ahead and subscribe. Click the like button and turn on your notifications so you'll be notified each time we upload a video. Today on TMC, we will be discussing a new relationship with the same old drama. Jamila, when you hear this, a new relationship, same drama, what comes to your mind?
Man, I once heard this older lady was saying that you're dating the same person just with a different face. And I was like, wow, it really makes me think about the common denominator in all those relationships is you. There's this old song, and don't quote me, I think it's by The Temptation, and say, everywhere you go, there you are.
Okay.
And so it's the same thing with relationships. So everywhere you go, there you are. So if you hadn't healed, if you keep experiencing the same thing, you might be like, it might be you. It might be you.
The thing that stands out to me the most, and I think of, is cycles. Because the cycle, if you think about the cycle of a wash machine, the cycle, wheels on a bike, you're going around and around and around. You're putting in an effort, but you're not going anywhere.
Yeah.
So it's the same thing over and over and over. And to think about, if you're a human being that finds yourself in a relationship and this relationship is now lining up the same as the last one, or the outcome to this relationship is the same as the last one, then the question that I would have in my mind is like, what is the problem? You said common denominator.
Yeah.
The common denominator is you, and it's not necessarily, it's not always that you are to say that you're the one that's wrong, but something is wrong.
Yes.
And if you're playing a part of the same type of relationships over and over and over, then I think it's very important that you evaluate, how do I keep getting in the same place over and over and over again?
And I think there's two avenues to that, because one is that you are attracting the same thing, but I think even more importantly, you're entertaining the same thing. And so usually there's a deficiency or dysfunction that we're used to. And I can speak from personal experience. That was a certain dysfunction that I was used to. And because I was so familiar with it, it's like relationship after relationship, it was like, wow, the same thing is happening. I'm getting the same outcome. And it's because that was a certain dysfunction or a certain need I was trying to get met in this relationship, and it was producing the same outcome. And it's like, man, and what's the other thing we had to say? I had to heal and be like, wow. And now that I'm in a place on my healing journey, I can look back and see this one thing caused the same outcome in my relationships. And so it's like, once I started to heal from that, my non-romantic relationships start to change. It's like, man, think about this. A lot of times we think about romantic relationships, but do you have the same type of friend? Do all your friends are just takers? And you say you're just a giver, and it's like, man, it's the same.
All I do is give, and everybody takes. When you say a common denominator, I think a lot of times, especially in conversations, and I find myself saying this phrase a lot of times, there's certain things that are not necessarily negative, but we take it on as a negative connotation. And so when I hear the common denominator in this new relationship, same drama, is you hear the word drama, so you take on the negativity, like, oh, I'm the reason why it's falling apart. No, but you said this key, dysfunction. And a lot of times that's what it is. Whether the dysfunction started in your childhood and your mama had these type of relationships, your granny had these type of relationships. And so that's what a relationship looks like to you. Or this is the type of exchange and relationship you had with your parental relationships and things of that nature. So now you have these type of friends. And I think we talk about this a lot on TMC, how things cross relationships. That's why we say taking your relationships from surviving to thriving, because how you show up in relationships goes across the board. When dysfunction becomes your normal functionality, then it produces itself in all types of relationships. And I'm used to this. It's normal. So even though it's a cycle, I don't like the outcome, don't necessarily like how it feels. I keep finding myself doing it yet again. And I might have met this person differently, or we might have became friends differently, but yet the relationship, I can see the tracks. And they normally say hindsight is 20/20. So it's when you look back. And the thing that I think the most that I've thought about as we were talking about this topic is the fact that oftentimes I think people don't take the time.
Yes.
You just talked about healing. In between, it doesn't matter, even if it's a friendship. If you had somebody that was your ride or die and that went left and you found yourself in that place multiple times, take time, sit down, evaluate what happened. How did we get here again?
Yes.
And I think that's important. So that's the healing part. How did we get here and what do I do to proceed different?
But the first thing is that when we really talk about dysfunction, and I'm reading a book with my book club and it talks about boundaries. And I think dysfunction prohibits people from setting boundaries.
Oh, yeah.
And that's how drama comes in, because you might say, oh, you always say healing, but healing allows you to set proper boundaries.
Absolutely.
And manage those boundaries and be able to say you've crossed a boundary. Okay, so this is going to happen. And so to really stand up and say, I want people around me to respect my boundaries. And so you might say, okay, healing, but healing allows you to say, and I can say that as I begin to heal in all my relationships, I realized that I didn't set proper boundaries. I had to take accountabilities. And so some of the things I was experiencing that might be deemed as drama was because I didn't have proper boundaries, but I didn't know how to set proper boundaries because I was unhealed in this particular area. And so when we talk about, okay, I want a new relationship, but I don't want to carry yesterday's baggage or yesterday's issues into this new relationship, a lot of times is that you have to get into a functional place to where you're able to set boundaries. And it just hit home. Yesterday, we went to a popular restaurant here in Houston, and our server, it was like a moment, like we were getting ready to go, and she just started talking, and she was talking about her relationships and how, and it went from a failed marriage to now her friends and her family. But the whole I was in there like, but you are the common denominator and all of these. And but then when the more we began to talk, the root cause was the rejection. And I told her, and it was like a moment to where we were able to speak into her life, but it was like, you keep expecting you from them. And so you're choosing, and this person is showing you who they are. And what Maya Angelou say,
better believe them.
You don't believe them, but you keep hoping against hope, and then you keep getting the same outcome.
Absolutely. And that in itself is dysfunctional. And it comes from a place where, because when you were talking about boundaries, I thought about myself, and it was like, at one point, everything else in my life was a success. It was like, my marriage is awesome and great. So why is other relationships not awesome and great? And it's like, I realized at that time, and the funny thing is that it was me leading a life group at church on the book Boundaries that made me go, taking responsibility. People, they were not violating, the boundaries were not set. And so the expectation was unspoken. Like, you shouldn't do this. It shouldn't feel like this. I don't want this happening to me. But it was never spoken. It was never communicated. But I expected them to respect it, even though it was never communicated. So what I learned in that was that I had to start setting boundaries. Then I have to communicate those boundaries. And then I have to also hold people to respecting those boundaries. You have to respect my yes as well as my no.
Yeah.
You may not like the no, but you have to respect it. Because for myself, even when I first started trying to set boundaries with certain people in certain relationships, it was like, well, I don't want them to think, well, I don't want this, and that. But the results that I was getting was the same thing over and over and over. So at that point, you have to say, it's not about what I don't want someone to think. It's about me protecting what belongs to me.
Yeah.
It's protecting me. And I think it's the same way, whether that relationship is romantic, whether it's platonic friendships, whether it's parental, whether it's your siblings. We all have to have functionality in our lives. So we have to pinpoint, which is healing from the things that I know. You said you're on your healing journey, and I think that everyone we have to take a look at the things that have caused the break in the cycle, right? This has caused the issue for me. This has caused me to show up in this way or show up in that way. And so now that I am acknowledging that what caused it, now we're not going to sit there because we could, who did this to me, what didn't happen in it. But now I'm going to take responsibility for what happens forward, which means I'm setting healthy boundaries and I'm going to hold you to them. And when I do that, then things will show up differently in my life.
Yeah. It goes back to what you just said about a lot of times you have to pause and reflect.
Absolutely.
And really know thyself. And, you'd be like, well, the drama may not be verbally or physically. It could be the drama is that you keep getting hurt.
Yes.
But you have to stop and say, okay, like you said, the reflection point. And for some, it may be a conversation. Some, it may be a book. Some, it may be this podcast that you're like, wow, I need to step back. It's like, man, this is why I'm getting these same repeated results. There's an accounting term that says garbage in, garbage out. And if we don't stop the garbage from coming in, whether it's unspoken expectations, unrealistic expectations, unable and unwilling to allow people to respect your boundaries, you're going to get the same thing.
Yeah.
And so if that's what you put in, that's what you're going to get out. So if you put in a boundaryless relationship, that's, you're screaming inside like I'm feeling violated, but nobody knows that. One of the things I used to, when I was a director, I would tell my employees, but I also use it in my personal life. I can't solve a problem I don't know about.
Yeah.
And so a lot of times, if communication is the key part of it, but sometimes we talk about we have to communicate with ourselves, and know thyself to know that, okay, I'm not communicating. Well, dial it all the way back. There's an issue. My relationships look all the same, and I don't think they're very healthy, or this is the outcome. And so I love what you're saying, that it was like a light bulb go off moment. Like, man.
Yeah, absolutely. That's exactly what it was, because at the time, of course, it wasn't romantic because it wasn't my marriage, but in those relationships, it was like these particular people, is like this stuff keeps happening over and over and over again. So I'm like, I taught the life group on boundaries. I've learned about boundaries. Okay. But what's happening here? So what's happening here is that even when I have the knowledge that I need to set boundaries, even when I have the knowledge that I have to do what it takes to protect me, and I don't want that to come off in a selfish way, but to protect what is me, so that something doesn't break me further or hurt me further. And when I set these boundaries, then I have to communicate them. So that's what I'm thinking about while we're talking. It's like, it's also some steps that go along with that. So you take the time to evaluate, and you're acknowledging that there's a problem here. Every relationship, or in these multiple relationships, because it may not be everyone, but in these multiple relationships, things keep happening the same way. And so if I want things to be different, now I have to assess what's happening. I've acknowledged what's happening. Now I have to assess what's happening. Then I have to make an effort for what's going to happen next. What's going to be my action steps moving forward to change this? And for me, it was first of all starting to communicate. This does not feel good when you do X, Y, Z. That doesn't mean I love you any less. It doesn't mean I don't want to be your friend. It doesn't mean that I'm not your family member, but here is what's not going to happen.
Yes.
And then when you do that, the relationships will show up differently. They'll show up differently, or you're going to have to make a decision because maybe the relationship has to be called a distant relationship, or it may have to be something that our amount of contact has to be limited, because it may be someone in your life that is like, I'm not excommunicating you, like we just done over with, you're a family member, but at the same time, I know that there's a certain space that you have to stay in, and I have to give you a certain amount of access.
Yeah.
And so I think that it's very definitely important to evaluate, reflect, assess what's happening, and then you got to set some action steps for what you're going to do moving forward so that this doesn't keep repeating itself.
That's spot on. That's spot on. And I think one time you said something that was so key, that as we begin to heal, we projected like, well, I want you to, well, they're not there yet. That's not where they're at on their journey. But that doesn't mean that until they get there, or if they get there, I have to keep accepting. And that's one of the things, because sometimes drama is not you creating the drama, is that you're accepting
it. Absolutely.
But it's like when you really stop being passive and you begin to be active in your relationships, and that changes. It's like what you said, like you're like, man, I'm aware and I'm alert. And so now I can change the way I relate to you. And I'm gonna say, like, full honesty, and like you said, full transparent, it's challenging sometimes to relate, especially when you had 20-year relationships, or whole life relationships or whatever else. It can be challenging to set boundaries, to change the way you relate. But when I tell you, nothing outweighs peace. Nothing outweighs peace. And then when you can realize, man, I can have relationships, and this is the key part, I'm not recreating that same pattern in my new relationships. And I'm picking difference. I'm picking the relationship different.
Selections is completely different. Yep. And I think that as you were talking, I thought about, you just acknowledged sometimes these are long. If it's a parental relationship, this is your whole life. If it's a sibling, this is your whole life. If it's your friend that you've been friends with 10, 15 years, if it's a romantic relationship and is ended, then you definitely have the ability to start over fresh. If it's a romantic relationship that you're in, such as a marriage, and you want it to shift and go in the right direction, then there is some things that you have to do. And when you do those things, it will show up differently depending upon where they are, because you begin to heal, you begin to change, you begin to transform. And like you said, the whatever animal we use, leopard changing their spots, tiger changing their stripes. Some people are three things that I always think about. They may be unwilling. They're unwilling to change. They're unwilling to respect your boundaries. They're unwilling for the relationship to be different, because it's always been like this, and that's worked for me. So why should it be different now? Or either they're unable to do what it is that you need done. And when I say that, I mean that in the form of showing up different, because they're incapable of doing the work, or don't want to do the work, don't understand it, whatever it is. And so if they're not showing up differently, then that's where the next step is going to determine what happens with that relationship. And that's the challenging part, because when you love somebody, no matter what the relationship is, when you love them, it's hard to release, let go, or distance yourself when something is causing you hurt and pain. But you have to think about what is more important. Is the peace more important, or not offending someone more important, or not making them respect your boundaries more important? We used to have one of the senior deacons at our church used to always talk about, God give you that peace that surpasses all understanding. And that's the peace that we want to have in our lives. Like, even when things are going on, I still have peace. I still have my peace. Nothing is disturbing that. And I think a lot more people are on that journey now to protect their space and protect their peace. And with that in mind, then that trumps everything, because a peace of mind and that hurt being able to say, hey, I'm not experiencing this anymore.
Yeah.
I'm not experiencing this pain anymore, especially when it's something that I can do something about, when it's something that I can make different choices about and different choices with you. So it shows up differently and it's going to work better for you, even if the other person may not fully understand it. And when I think about in my marriage, if there has ever been anything that my husband talks to me about, because of how I love him, then I'm gonna make the adjustment. I'm gonna adjust, especially if it was something that was hurting you.
Yeah.
Like, this is hurting me. Okay, adjust. You do that the whole time. It's just may be the right word. I'm not sure, but you do that in relationship with somebody when you love and you care about them. So if you're unwilling to do that, then it's like, what is it really? And if they decide to walk away because you're saying this hurts me, this is wounding me, this is breaking me, it's breaking parts of me, and they like, okay, what you mean? You know, they don't, if they're unwilling, then it is best for them to walk away. Yeah. It's best for them to be wherever, because maybe maybe they will find the person that they will show up differently for. Because I don't know if you all know anyone, but I do know people that they may were unwilling to do it for whoever, but they did it for the next whoever. You know, and that means that's who it was for. That's it. That's who you need to be with, because you cared, you invested, you loved enough to say, I'm gonna be different for them. I'm gonna show up different for them, and be okay with that. Don't feel no type of way. It wasn't meant for us to be. That's you were meant to be with them, and that's what it was meant to be.
And that's what it took. I actually, years ago, I was in a relationship and it was a contention and he wouldn't change. I was like, he changed for that person.
Now
he
you
was
wanna
willing to change. But I didn't get bitter. I was like, you know, he was willing to change for her.
Yeah.
So it's like, but it goes back to what you said, unable,
unwilling, or incapable.
And so he wasn't incapable. He was just unwilling. And it's like what you say, hey, that's your sauce. Like, that's who you was meant to.
It is what it is. And she's the one that you were willing to make those adjustments for. She's the one you were willing to make those changes for. So kudos to y'all. Go.
That's it.
And then for the person on the flip side, if you would have accepted it, that they're unwilling to change, and you accept it, then now you're living in the mud that you don't want to live in for the rest of the time in that relationship, or for the rest of your life, for something that they were willing to change for someone else for. So it's like, why should I accept it? Why should it be something that I'm okay with living with? Because you're incapable or unwilling to change it. Like, no, it's not necessary. It would have been totally different for you than it is for the person that they are with.
You would have settled.
Oh, yeah. Yes.
And so when you go down that list, and if you choose, if they're unwilling, unable, incapable, and you choose to move forward, a lot of times you are settling.
Yeah.
I realized that if I would have accepted what he was, the issue that wasn't going to change at that moment, I realized I was going to settle. And it's like, why settle on something so important as a marriage? It's like, no.
If I accept it, then I'm telling you that it's okay. And that's the other thing as well. Before we learn, if we don't set boundaries or don't understand about setting boundaries and the things that we're speaking about. So before you hear this podcast, the person or people that these dramas are showing up with over and over again, it is being said to them that you're okay with this. Because as long as you're accepting something, then the other party feels that you're okay with it. You're okay with it. And then at some point you may decide, like, okay, I took it for this long, but I'm tired of this. I don't want to do this. And it's like, what process or what steps do we do to reset, to turn this around? Because to them, it's not everything is okay. Because I guarantee, if you would have talked to the people at the time that were violating and hurting me, they wouldn't say, oh, I wasn't doing nothing.
Right.
Because they was winning. They was getting they was getting whatever they needed. So it's like, what was I doing to her? I wasn't doing nothing to her. And they might say, I love her. I didn't. No, I'm not that they didn't love me, but you were still hurting me.
Yeah.
And to them, the relationship was okay because I was accepting what was happening.
Yeah.
I was accepting what was happening, but then I didn't like what was happening.
Right.
And that's where the issue came in. That was the drama. Because I think sometimes we hear drama, the only thing we think about is fussing, cussing, fighting. And that's not always drama. For somebody else, that drama is those secret tears that you keep crying because your heart is broken. For someone else, drama is that pain and that rejection that you feel because you are being rejected and you continue to chase after someone or chase after multiple someones that are rejecting you in the same way over and over and over. And the one thing, if you take nothing else from this podcast today, please take away that you have the power in your own life to stop the drama from happening. Just like when the washer is going, the washer is set for a certain time for the cycle to stop. You as a person have full control of your life. And when I say full control, I mean your actions, because God is in ultimate control. Yeah. But you have the control to decide when these cycles stop. Once you acknowledge them, wait a minute, this keeps showing. I've been in 5 relationships and they've all ended up with him cheating on me. Or I've been, this relationship that I have with my parents is the same relationship I have with every friend that, I consider somebody very close to me. Everybody that's close to me is doing the same thing to me. Whatever it is that you're saying for the new relationship, same old drama, it is showing up again. You have the power to make it stop. You do. You have the power to make it stop because you have the power to set boundaries and you have the power to require the people that you are in relationship with to respect those boundaries, or there has to be some type of consequence. And I use those words lightly because sometimes people take that like, what you mean consequence? There is a consequence because there's going to be less of me in your life. Yeah. If you cannot respect my boundaries and you're continuing to hurt me, there's going to be less of me in your life. Something, family, friends, whatever, there may be a distance and we're not spending as much time together. Or it's like, hey, how you doing? God bless you. But that's the separate because you don't want to keep experiencing that hurt over and over again.
Yeah. If I had to summarize what you just said, when you show up different, you have different outcomes.
Yeah.
Your relationship looks different.
Absolutely.
You have different results. And it goes back to the beginning of the conversation. You have to show up different. You have the power and the right to show up differently.
Absolutely. Yeah.
Well, we would like to thank you for joining us for another enlightening conversation on the TMC Podcast.
We hope you enjoyed this conversation. And if you did, go ahead and subscribe. Click the like button and turn on your notifications so you'll be notified each time we upload a video.
Well, we want to thank you for joining in and hope that you join us next week for another exciting episode where we're here to help you take your relationship from
surviving to thriving. Bye. See you next week.